Hello and welcome to my presentation on backwards mapping for creative arts. This presentation forms part B of assessment item 2. Today I'll walk you through how backwards mapping can be used to create an effective unit in creative arts. Backwards mapping is a teaching framework for designing a unit. We start with the end goal first, and we plan the unit so students can achieve these goals by the end. These learning outcomes are guided by the expectations and requirements of the NESA Creative Arts syllabus. After defining the outcomes, the next step is to design assessments to test whether students have achieved these outcomes. The final step involves planning activities, developing teaching strategies, and providing resources to prepare students for the assessment. The learning goals are derived from the learning outcomes and are designed with a meaningful context in mind. We want students to appreciate how artists use various techniques to make their work look so realistic and captivating. These techniques involve blending light and dark tones, blending color, incorporating texture, and adding perspective and scale. This is the learning outcome that I've selected, which has been taken straight from the NESA Creative Arts syllabus for Stage 2. The main outcome is VAS 2.2, using the forms to suggest the qualities of subject matter. Below describes the outcome content that's being integrated. This unit will mainly focus on the painting and drawing aspect of this content, so how techniques in painting and drawing create mood and atmosphere, how light and dark is used to affect subject matter, and how modifying the scale can exaggerate certain qualities of subject matter. The unit incorporates various formative assessment strategies, so these are teacher observation, peer assessment, self-reflection, and digital documentation. The teacher will be circulating the classroom with a checklist to make sure students are applying techniques correctly and to give immediate feedback to students. The teacher will ask targeted questions to make students think deeper about the techniques they are using. A checklist will also be provided to students, so when they finish their activity they can swap work and use the checklist to evaluate each other's work and provide constructive feedback. Lesson 1 is about blending light and dark tones on a circle to make it look like a 3D sphere. So the checklist here would be the smooth transition from light to dark, correct placement of shadows, consistency of the blending, and the overall 3D effect. The teacher will ask students questions like, does your sphere look round? Why or why not? This would make them reflect on whether they're blending light and dark tones appropriately. Lesson 2 is about blending colors to create a realistic sunset. The checklist for this would contain smooth transitions between colors, mixing colors to create blends, and the realistic look of the final sunset drawing. Lesson 3 is about adding texture to trees to create a 3D realistic effect, and adding surrounding objects to create a sense of scale. So the checklist here would involve the application of bark lines, scale accuracy, and the 3D look of the tree. The teacher should ask questions like, how can we make the tree appear larger without increasing its size? This would make students think about how the surrounding elements would influence perspective and scale in their drawing. For the summative assessment task at the end of the unit, students will create an artwork which depicts children playing at a forest at sunrise. Students will be assessed on how realistic they can make their artwork look. This is by applying the techniques they've learned from the previous 3 lessons. So when they're drawing the sunrise, they should be using the color blending techniques they learned from lesson 2. When drawing the trees, they should be adding textured bark lines like they learned from lesson 3. From lesson 1, they learned how to blend light and dark tones and add shadows. So this is what they should be doing to the trees to make them look 3D. Students will also need to pay attention to the scale and perspective. When they draw children and objects around the trees, they need to be thinking about scale and perspective, which they learnt in lesson 3. In the first lesson, students will learn how to blend light and dark tones to give a circle a 3D effect. The first thing the teacher will do is engage the students with meaningful context. By showing students artworks of 3D spheres, such as a drawing of a basketball, the teacher will point out how the 3D effect is created by blending light and dark tones, which mimics the way light falls on an object. The teacher will show this by shining a torch on a handball and pointing out how the color gradually becomes lighter away from the light source, and also the shadow it makes. The teacher will model the process of making a circle 3D by drawing a circle on the board and gradually shading from light to dark. The next lesson focuses on blending colors, and it contains 3 activities. In the first activity, students will receive a horizontal strip divided into 5 sections. They will color the first section yellow, the second section orange, and the last section blue. Then they will blend yellow into orange in the second section, and then orange into blue in the fourth section, focusing on having smooth transitions. In the second activity, students will work in pairs to create a colour wheel, making sure they're blending smoothly between adjacent colours. In the third activity, students will apply their blending techniques learned from the previous activities and will try to draw a realistic looking sunset. They will focus on smoothly blending yellow, orange and blue. The next lesson contains two activities, one that shows the importance of texture and the other the importance of scale. To demonstrate the purpose of texture, the teacher will show students a basic tree outline alongside a version with texture lines on the trunk. This will show them how texture lines create a 3D effect. The teacher will also show how adding more texture lines to one side makes the tree look more round. Students will then draw their own tree outline and add texture lines, focusing on creating depth by placing more lines on one side. Students will then draw their own tree outline and add texture lines, and placing more lines on one side to enhance roundness. In the next activity, the teacher will present a mock drawing of a human standing next to a tree, where the human is nearly the same size as the tree. This will illustrate how incorrect scale affects realism. Students will add reference objects like people, rocks, or animals around their previous drawn tree to create a realistic sense of scale. These are the teaching strategies used throughout the unit. Teacher modelling reduces cognitive load, which allows students to focus on developing their skills. All the techniques they learn throughout the lessons are explicitly modelled by the teacher at the start. Discussing and questioning helps students understand the purpose of their artistic choices. So asking questions like, does your tree look 3D? Why and why not? How can we make the sunset look more natural? Taking photos of students' work during the activities allows them to track their progress over time and helps the teacher provide more specific feedback. If a student's finished product lacks realism or depth, the teacher can look at photos of the work taken midway through and point out areas for improvement. The lessons incorporate cooperative learning as students analyse each other's work using a provided checklist and give constructive feedback. The colour wheel activity also promotes teamwork as students work together to complete a smoothly blended colour wheel. This collaboration encourages motivation as both students want to do well while working on the same task. That concludes my backwards mapping presentation. Thank you for listening.